Hi, I'm Jerry Bechtold, and what we're going to do today is to explain a little bit about the Model 400 chemical chlorinator. Non-electric, no moving parts. If you're using this where normally you would have to use a switch, flow switch, those type of applications are not necessary with this. This mechanical chlorinator will do everything that other unit will do, electrical unit I'm referring to, in regards to supplying chlorine. We cannot get it as precise in parts per million of chlorine. I will explain a little bit about that a little bit later. Let's get into the Model 400. The Model 400 is all PVC material, with the exception of the outer lid, which is this unit right up here. Take that off. That's the outer lid. And that's the unit. Now the unit consists of a body, inlet, outlet, center tube and cap, and a rate of feed valve or a non-functional rate of feed valve. So let's start with the plumbing of the unit into a water line. Each unit comes with an 1.5 inch adapter, as well as a 3/4 inch adapter. So you can use either one of these. It's held together with a union. There is an O-ring seal in it, as you can see. Now if you're going to install 1.5 inch, 1.25 or 1 inch, you use the 1.5 inch adapter and put a bushing in it to reduce it to 1.25 or 1 inch, depending on whether you want slip socket or whatever. That's the adapter that you will use in this unit to make the installation on the water line. So you've got 3/4 and you've got 1.5 inch. The unit consists of a cavity where you put your chlorine that will hold approximately 4 pounds of chlorine tablets. The chlorine tablets are calcium hypochlorite. Normally you run 65 to 71, 70, 71, sometimes as high as 72% of chlorine residual. The binding agent in this chlorine is calcium. The thing that you want to make sure that you understand is if you use this in a rate of feed mode, which we'll get into in a minute, if it's installed after a water conditioner, you are going to pick up very low grain hardness, 1-2 grains of hardness, depending on how hard your water is. So we normally recommend this be installed before that equipment. There are exceptions to that for certain problems. I'm not going to get involved in that. Your rep can help you with that if you get into a situation where you need that help. But the unit functions with the settings. Now this is what we call a standard unit. This is a unit which is set up so that it will be variable water pressure. By variable water pressure, we mean one thing. The pump comes on and it's building up the pressure that's in your water system. During that point of time, for whatever that is, and usually a pump cycle will run 30 to 60 seconds for the most part, you will not chlorinate your water during that period of time. So there again, your rep can help you as to whether or not your water is in need of a retention tank, depending on what it is you're doing. So the way it works in this system is the center tube, which is this unit right here. It has a series of letters and numbers. Those coincide with holes that are in the actual cap. So 1, 2, and 3. And if you line this up, consider this being an arrow with an arrowhead down here. And this number is number 1 right here. There's a visible hole. Now there's also another hole on level 1, which is a smaller hole. The smaller hole, this is contrary to common sense. The smaller hole will give you a higher concentration of chlorine residual than the bigger hole. The reason for that is that the bigger hole, with this down in that system, the bigger hole will let more water transfer into that hole to get it down into this smaller hole, which is directly located on top of the system flow water. Right here. The water comes in, goes in, down this tube. Chlorinated water is fed out. So when you use the bigger hole, you've got less water that's going to be pushed down up between these two pipes to get to this smaller hole that will take you directly into the water stream. So what happens is you pump water out here and you're pushing at the same time to go up and over. So the water that makes the second pass through that chlorine is going to give you a higher concentration of chlorine residual that's going to be put in your water. Now, if you're using it in the rate of feed mode, that's where we have constant feed on, the pressure is the same. It's about the best way I can put it. We don't have pressure variation going up and down, up and down. On a constant feed water system, we need to change the rate of feed valve, which in this case, as a standard unit, comes with a plug in it. Now the rate of feed valve has a slot in it. If you can see that. So we're going to put that in. Put the clip back on. Now, most important, if you're using the rate of feed valve, all of these holes need to be in the off position. Through these three holes, there should be no visible hole showing. That's going to cause all the water to transfer into the unit, and at that point it's going to push it down, up, down the center tube again into the water stream. So the control of the flow is now done here. When you're in the standard 12 o'clock position, that's not off, that's minimum flow. You can increase that very slightly, it's very critical. And you do this till you get to the amount of chlorine residual that you'll want for your water problem. And in each package, you'll find that we have a sheet which will tell you how to figure out how much chlorine you need. This line right here represents iron. This line represents hydrogen sulfide. So as you can see, we are running with this line on iron coming across. We're right here. So we're talking, we need, in fact it's written right here, we need 0.64 parts per million of chlorine residual for every 1 part of iron that we're going to treat. Hydrogen sulfide, we need 2.2 parts per million of chlorine for every 1 part of hydrogen sulfide. If you've got both in your water, you have to combine these two to come up with the parts per million that you need to treat that water correctly. All right, let's go to breakdown on this. Here's your lid. One of the important things, there's some yellow labels on here that are important and they need to be dealt with. If the customer ever is going to go away, going to be gone 3-4 weeks, I usually try to use 2 weeks as it, because if we're talking 2, they'll stretch it to 4 anyways, usually. But if you're going to put the system in bypass, you need to get the chlorine residual and all the chlorine out of this system. So you would like service it, but don't add more chlorine into it. And that's what we're doing here. The unit is bypass, remove chlorine. And as you can see, there's a lock nut there. This is our outer lid, which is made with a fibered material, strong as steel. This does not touch the water. Anything that touches the water in this system is either a rubber material that's acceptable for what we're doing, or PVC. The entire unit is made of PVC as far as touching water. This is the only part, the lid, the outer lid, is the only part that does not touch water. We'll put this back in here. Now we recommend, from a service standpoint, this O-ring is going to be the O-ring that needs to be serviced, replaced periodically. We say every 12 to 18 months, replace this O-ring. It just pops off, you pop another one on. Do not use Vaseline on it. Use plumber's grease or silicone grease. There will be no deterioration of the rubber material if you use the proper lubricant on it. And a lot of people don't use it. I personally want to see it on there, but we'll put this back together. If you'll notice, when you receive your unit, on the lid there's warnings also embossed into this. The lid O-ring, lid wrench will let you take the unit apart. Now, I want to touch on something that is critical to understand, and that is when the unit is serviced, it needs to be done in a fashion where you basically take this center tube out, take the lid off of course, take the center tube out. Now the water level will drain to this point, provided that on the outgoing line you put a T in here and put a hose bib or some means of releasing the pressure from here. Then there should be a shutoff valve on both sides of this unit so you can isolate it. Open this valve, that will release the pressure in here. Now, this center tube and cap must be cleaned each and every time that you service this unit. So what we've done to make it easier, you've got two of them. When you open this up, you take this one out. Clean the nasty residual that you're going to get built up in here. And that can be done in one of two ways. One of the simplest ways is to tighten this thing hand tight so that you can now turn it over and dump it. Flip it back up, tighten these back by hand. Now you don't need a wrench to do this. The O-ring will make the difference. Hand tight, loosen it to service it, flip it over, dump this whatever in here into a bucket to dispose of. This center tube, you take it as, this is the one that just come out of it, set that over here, take the clean one, you put the clean one back in there, make sure your hole settings are where they're supposed to be. Now the hole settings are only used, again I want to emphasize that, they're only used when you're using it in a variable mode. If you're using it in a rate of feed valve mode, those holes all have to be closed by the center tube and cap. Turn that cap to where there's no visible holes. Now we're ready. We've cleaned this. We've got the old tube set over here. I want you to take this, put it in a jar or a bucket or something. Let it set with white vinegar, pure white vinegar. Don't mix it with water, just put it in that, let it set. When it comes out, it's going to look like brand new. The most important thing is that all the internals of this thing are not going to build up with calcium. That will happen. And the biggest problem is the guy that doesn't want to service the unit. He wants to open it up and just dump tablets in it. And if that be the case, that tube will clog up to the point where you cannot get the lid off. If you ever get to the point that you can't get the lid off, it's because you haven't serviced this unit correctly. You have to clean this each and every time to be assured that you're going to have the success of being able to open that unit the next time with the wrench. When you put the unit back on, you don't even need the wrench. you're making your seal with the O-ring. So you put that back on, tighten it down. You're ready to turn the water on. Normally when you turn the water on, it takes 2 or 3 pump cycles before your chlorine residual is back up to its normal settings. One other thing that you should be aware of is the fact that you probably noticed this yellow label, danger. Do not mix different types of chlorine tablets together. The biggest problem you've got is you've got stabilized and non-stabilized chlorine. The best way to explain that is that stabilized chlorine is what they use in swimming pools. And the acid in that, which is one of them, is cyanuric acid. You certainly don't want to be drinking water that potentially got cyanuric acid in it. You want to use nothing but non-stabilized chlorine in this unit. And God forbid, don't ever mix the two, because you can cause spontaneous combustion. No matter whose brand of chlorine it is, you want non-stabilized chlorine. That's the EPA registered chlorine for consumable water. Non-stabilized chlorine is what you want. Stabilized chlorine, pool chlorine, will not work in here correctly.